all-you-can-eat buffet employees. What is the most heinous culinary crime you've seen patrons commit? Story 1. In Sharm el-Sheikh, nearly 20 years ago, the hotel was full of Russians. We were one of only 3 British couples in a whole massive 5-star hotel. I will never forget it. The first morning, we stood open-mouthed in the restaurant as we watched them. One group pushed a big load of tables together so around 30 of them could sit together. They filled their table with all the food, trays included, and whole baskets of fruit. When they left, a few of the women took plastic carrier bags to the buffet and started filling them with fried eggs, beans, sausages, hash browns, all mushed together in bags. Security guards had to break up at least one fight and usually 2 or 3 every mealtime. A member of staff came and spoke to us, and upon realizing we were from the UK, ushered us to what was the VIP part but was basically where they put anyone who was not Russian. The other 2 couples explained that we got real cutlery and plates, etc. In that bit, and the Russians got disposable stuff because they either broke or stole it. We got table service instead of a buffet as it was almost impossible to get through them, especially once they knew you weren't Russian. It was quite a spectacle. They actually burst the glass door of the restaurant one night trying to be the first ones in. The chefs had turkeys and beef joints. They were supposed to go up and get some carved onto their plate. They were taking the whole thing. Whole gâteau. We were treated brilliantly by the staff. They referred to the Russians as the pigs. At first, we had reserved tables with security in the bar in the evenings because the Russians would get drunk and fight with each other and try to fight with us. One of the couples we met and got along with quite well included a man who was a producer and a woman who worked in music for a well-known television program that was popular at the time. Fairly respectable people. The man and I went to the bar, and when we returned, we found a group of Russian women trying to attack our wives and physically take our tables and chairs, claiming they had nowhere to sit. Security had to form a ring around them. After that, we were moved to a private bar. It was a very memorable 2 weeks, over Christmas and New Year too. Before we continue, do us a quick favor, smash that like button and subscribe to support our channel. Story 2. I was the chef of a buffet and eventually decided I couldn't do it anymore. It was, without a doubt, the most unsanitary, cheap, unhealthy, and exhausting experience I've ever had. Not because of the staff, but because of the customers. Customers are disgusting. They eat in line with their fingers, straight from the steam table. They pick their noses, grab the serving utensils, and often reuse the same plates they've already eaten from, even when new plates are right there. Think about how often people actually wash their hands. Now realize they're all touching those same serving utensils. That pizza you grabbed with the tongs? Yeah, you're really just enjoying it with Grandpa's unwashed hands, the same ones he wiped himself with, or maybe with your neighbor's hands. Fresh off a solo session, bon appetit. The food is cheap, very cheap. The goal is to keep food costs around 30%, and that's on the high end, so how much quality do you really think you're getting? There's a reason they give you just a thin slice of beef. Most of it is pre-made, processed food using lower quality ingredients. The priority is profit, not nutrition. It's also incredibly unhealthy. Buffets rely heavily on starches, fats, and sugar to fill you up fast. Most of the desserts? Bulk frozen items from US foods, not fresh, just thawed and served. The omelet bars were decent if you wanted one, but even then, all the vegetables came pre-sliced, and the scrambled eggs? Liquid eggs from a carton. The buffet life wasn't for me. I left and moved on to a different kind of kitchen, and now I work with my family at a local business. My advice: skip buffets whenever you can. If you do go, stick to proteins like fish, chicken, beef, and fresh vegetables. Avoid everything else. It's most likely processed or frozen. Story 3. Years ago, we were standing in line at a buffet on a cruise, and there was an old man, probably in his 90s, about 3 people ahead of us. He picked up the serving spoon of some rice concoction and took a bite right off the spoon. About that time, a middle-aged woman walked up, grabbed the spoon from him, and said, "Dad, no, you can't do that." She turned to a floor attendant, handed her the spoon, and told her what happened, and asked her to please get another spoon. I am not sure the attendant spoke English because she stood there holding the spoon, looking confused after the lady walked away, and then just stuck the spoon back in the rice. We all groaned loudly in disgust, protested, and have never eaten at a buffet since. Story 4. I was at a Chinese buffet when the servers started running around. They went to each table and told them that if people wanted more food, they should get it now, and within the next 5 minutes or so. Within 10 minutes, 2 buses full of mainland Chinese tourists came in like a swarm of locusts. It was just like you see in those videos of people fighting over trays. We were pretty much done, but stayed for the chaos and free entertainment. They were screaming at employees to bring more. Workers couldn't even put the shrimp and other seafood trays in the buffet before being surrounded and having food grabbed. One guy took a whole tray of chicken wings to his table. We didn't stay too long, but the restaurant was like a war zone with stuff all over the floors. I've traveled extensively, and everywhere I've gone, it's the mainland Chinese tourists who are the rudest people. Story 5. I was a cook/sous chef for 17 years. My last job was in a popular Austrian area in the Alps. We had a buffet lunch every afternoon, more like an afternoon snack. 3 different mains, 3 different sides, and a collection of salads and veggies and some cake. Once a week it had a theme, and usually I would have to stand at the buffet and make either fresh waffles or fresh Austrian pancakes. I had a huge setup with tons of toppings and ice cream at one end. I was in the middle, and at the other end was the stuff I needed to make waffles/pancakes, like a container with the batter. Everything had a description. Everything, even my batter. You'd wonder why I put up a sign to let the people know that it was the batter. People would watch me pour the batter in the pan/machine, and then they would grab the ladle and pour some of the batter over their food. I was completely baffled the first time. I couldn't understand. I even told the people that it was the batter, and they would not stop. I even put lids on everything else. I would grab the ladle out of their hands. It did not stop them. They all told me that I had no idea what I was talking about and that this was vanilla sauce. I kept pointing them to the vanilla sauce at the other end. They did not care. The weirdest thing is, all of them did not have dessert on their plates. It was a main dish like casserole, ham, salads, paella, lasagna, and whatever was on the buffet, and they poured what they thought was vanilla sauce over it. To make it more weird, all of them ate it. Their plates were all empty. I had to notify the director as the batter not only had raw flour, but also raw eggs in them. I did not want to be responsible, and my director did not believe me. So one afternoon, he sat behind the bar and watched it all happen and was confused too. We had to stop making fresh waffles and pancakes. Edit to answer the most asked question. We had signs in 3 languages, German, English, Italian, that told the people what it was and to not touch it. It was out of reach. Really far out of reach. Story 6. I worked as a baker and dessert bar at a Golden Corral in high school. I've seen my share. Kid wiping snot off his nose and then reaching into the container of gummy bears at the ice cream station. He did the same to the candy corn and the chocolate chips. The customer used his tray as his dinner plate. Technically, there was a plate on the tray, but it was buried under a mountain of food. The worst part was you could no longer tell what was food anymore. It just looked like a pile of pig slop. Saw a woman open a foil-wrapped sweet potato and then proceeded to make an ice cream sundae out of it. She second-toed a tray of brownies from the oven and put them on the line. Guy takes the entire tray and takes it back to his table. He hunched over the tray and ate every brownie while glaring at the people he was with. I've seen wolves eat with less anger. While making cookies, a woman came behind the counter and just grabbed a handful of dough out of my tub. Didn't put it on a plate or a bowl, just walked back to her table eating it out of her hand. Non-customer atrocities. The manager kept insisting that baked chicken didn't really need to be cooked for 1 hour in the oven. 15 minutes was enough time. No one noticed. Story 7. We had the typical church crowd that came in on Sundays, and there were two groups from what I'd call rival churches. I think they were both Baptist, but the pastors would sit nearby and loudly debate whatever their topic of the week was. The families would sometimes be cordial, sometimes sneer at each other, and you never quite knew how it would end. Sometimes one side would just get up and leave abruptly. So, one of the pastors had an adult son with special needs who loved to eat. I found out early on that this kid, probably about 25 while I was 16, would eat until he got sick and then vomit in the bathroom. The manager basically expected it every week and would send me to clean it up. Sometimes he made it to the toilet, sometimes not, and sometimes just the sink, which was the worst to clean. His parents didn't give him rat buns that he threw up every week. His dad would sometimes come into the bathroom while I was cleaning, leave little Bible comics from Chick publications, and then leave. I always got a kick out of those because their illustrations looked like Mad Magazine, but the content was wild, like saying Dungeons and Dragons is devil worship. Super exciting times. Very sanitary. Story 8. My mom used to work at a casino with a buffet as a sew. She's got some wild stories and some pretty dark ones too. My favorites: the retired police chief and his wife used to come in carrying garbage bags and containers, freely filling them with as much food as they could. Despite being very well off, they exploited the husband's former position in the police force to intimidate staff into letting them treat the buffet like their personal grocery store. They regularly caused scenes, refused to tip or clean up after themselves, and screamed at workers that they'd use their connections with the police union to put the casino buffet out of business. Management finally stood up to them and banned them after they started walking out without paying. There were two morbidly obese women who came to the buffet and stuffed as much food as they could into their stomachs. They'd eat until they vomited right at the table and then kept eating afterward. They were eventually banned. A gunman came into the place looking for an employee he used to be romantically involved with. The woman had restraining orders against him for prior domestic abuse and stalking. My mom hid in the walk-in freezer with her co-workers and a couple of customers. The gunman ended up opening fire, injuring several people, including the woman he was stalking, who survived with non-fatal wounds. He was later killed while in jail. There were lots of octogenarians throwing punches over all-you-can-eat crab legs, and plenty of drunk people urinating and defecating themselves or wandering into the buffet covered in their own mess after long hours of gambling. Most didn't care and would be back on the floor within 30 minutes after being told to leave. There was a guy who came in wearing expensive jewelry and clothes. He always had 5 to 7 foreign women with him, dressed to the nines, beautiful but silent. None spoke English, and they looked like sleepwalkers, never making eye contact and always kept under close watch. The casino bent over backward for him because he was a high roller, so my mom and I reported it to the human trafficking hotline. The casino also tried to trap employees by scattering decoy money around the buffet and back of house. If an employee touched the money, they'd be fired for theft. My mom nearly had a heart attack when someone dumped a bunch of change into the hood of her coat hanging in the employee closet. There was a lot of elder abuse. The casino offered check cashing, and caregivers or relatives would drop grandma off at the buffet, cash her supplemental security income check, then lose it all gambling while grandma sat alone at the table for hours. There was also child abandonment. Parents struggling with gambling addiction would leave their kids in the car or drop them off somewhere without age restrictions, then gamble for days at a time. Story 9. My first job ever, at 15, was as a dishwasher at a seafood restaurant near the beach. The place mostly served tourists. Since it was on an island, you had to cross a big bridge to reach from the mainland. I was seen as a go-getter, so after a few weeks I moved up to head oyster sucker and chief prep cook. One of my jobs was boiling shrimp for the UPLM shrimp appetizer on the menu. Once a week, they had an all-you-can-eat boiled shrimp special in the attached bar and lounge. On one of those days, I noticed the owner. Everyone called him Frenchie. He kept pacing from his office to the doors leading into the bar, peeking through the window and muttering curses to himself. This happened 4 or 5 times. After the 5th time, he went into the walk-in cooler, checked how much boiled shrimp was left, came out furious, and told me to boil more shrimp because 2 big parties were eating him into bankruptcy. I couldn't believe it. I'd already prepped a large supply of shrimp. The line cooks and I decided we had to see who was devouring all the shrimp. We crowded around the swinging doors, peered through the window, and there were my dad and his best friend gorging themselves with huge grins on their faces. Peels and shrimp tails were everywhere. My dad is a big man, and his buddy was too. The cooks made a bunch of jokes, and I just laughed along, never telling them that was my dad. Story 10. Not something I witnessed, but something I was told about. I worked in a buffet-style dining hall in college where patrons put their dirty dishes on trays that moved to the back. Employees would grab the trays, scrape and rinse the dishes, then send them down a conveyor belt to the dishwasher. There was a guy in the dish room who would grab untouched food off the dirty dishes and eat it. Worth mentioning, we got hefty employee discounts. Breakfast and lunch were $3 each. Dinner, $4, all still all you can eat. And just because those fries and nuggets look untouched, doesn't mean someone didn't drop the basket full of them on the floor, pick them up, and stick them back on the tray to be disposed of. Which I saw pretty often. Just because the mac and cheese looks untouched, doesn't mean a sick student didn't breathe all over it before deciding they couldn't eat it. Legend has it that the guy never got sick from it, but I have some serious doubts. Story 11. I used to work at my school's all-you-can-eat cafeteria. One day, a visiting football team from a rival school came in for lunch. One of the players, a big guy, walked over to the fruit table and loaded up his plate with watermelon. Then he headed to the condiments and slathered the whole thing in mayonnaise. I watched, half amazed and half horrified, as he ate what looked like half a watermelon and half a jar of mayo in one sitting. It was honestly one of the most bizarre and impressive things I've ever seen. Story 12. The buffet limited each guest to 1 plate at a time, but you could return to the buffet table to get a new plate and more food. A guest apparently didn't understand the process, stacked the plate high with an entire meal, appetizers, mains, salads, and on the precarious pile, added cake, soft-serve ice cream, and poured chocolate syrup over the whole thing. The staff watched in amazement as she gingerly walked back to her table, not spilling anything, and sat down with her friends. The friends apparently explained the 1 plate at a time rule, but to her credit, she shrugged her shoulders and ate all the food without complaining, and even went back for a second serving of cake and ice cream. Story 13. I worked on a cruise ship. One midnight buffet was chocolate-themed. Everything was chocolate. A passenger took a tray and filled it, including a whole 8-inch chocolate cake. He then placed upturned glasses at each corner of his tray and added a second tray, then a third. He eventually sat with 3 full trays of food. I saw him pick up whole cakes as if they were sandwiches. I returned an hour or so later, and he was in the line for another run. His table had the detritus of his previous binge. Story 14. In high school, I worked at a buffet, and this old man would come and wait patiently for us to refill the fried chicken. He would then take every single piece, usually 12-15 pieces at a time. Eat every bit to a bare bone and repeat. He would generally eat 2-3 plates full of fried chicken, nothing else, when he'd come in about 1-2 times per week. If I remember correctly, his record was 52 pieces of chicken. We'd start making double batches, one for him and one for the buffet. I got to where I knew him, and I'd catch his eye and get a thumbs up or down if he was done. I had another dude that used to come and take several pieces of chocolate cake from the bar, place them in a single plate, do soft serve over the top and cover it in ketchup as if it was chocolate sauce. Story 15. In my elementary school, in the higher grades, you could volunteer to help serve lunch for like a week. I remember one day I was supervising the salad bar and a girl got a spoon of sour cream, used the same spoon to get some bacon bits, took a moment to contemplate the spoon, then sucked it clean and put it back. I quickly took it. That was my first time I remember witnessing somebody being gross around food. Story 16. Not sure if this was a crime or just good financial sense by me. Back in college, in the early 2000s, me and my cousin/roommate would frequent a Chinese buffet that allowed takeout. You paid for a styrofoam container and then could fill it however you liked. The first time we went, we filled them as you would expect. Rice, noodles, stir-fry veggies, and proteins. But after we ate, we discussed that no one ever looked in our container after we purchased it. So, the next time we went, we just filled those things to the brim with protein. Those suckers felt like they weighed 10 pounds. Then we just cooked the rice or noodles at home. We could 4-5 meals out of those containers. Rice is cheap. Steak and shrimp is not. Story 17. I know the question was likely aimed at food combinations, but the standout buffet tragedy for me was the poor folks with bulimia that would eat in the bathroom. They would sneak the little dessert plates in, binge and purge. We'd find the plates hidden in the little stall trash can meant for used feminine products. Our boss called those trash cans surprise boxes 'cause you never knew what you'd get when it was your turn to clean the bathroom. Story 18. Not an employee, but if you've ever been to Golden Corral in Texas, you know they have a melted chocolate fountain for people to put on berries and ice cream and whatnot, and kids stick their mouth right under that fountain sometimes. That chocolate dribble off their spit-laden cheeks just gets sucked back up to the top and back down through the fountain. Story 19. Not really a buffet, but I have worked at multiple self-service stations. I've worked with a salad bar and donut case, but I've heard another story from a coworker who worked with the soup bar. When I would try setting up the salad bar in the morning, I had to do 2 trips because of the utensils. I would often catch and scold customers who tried to handle the salad with their bare hands and tossed out a lot of salad once or twice because I was too late. Eventually, I brought out the utensils first before bringing the food, but even that wasn't foolproof. I've seen people pick up something they dropped and put it back in the respective container before. Yes, I tossed that too. The self-service donut case was a special time too. It wasn't unusual for someone to pick up a donut, take a bite, and then put it back if they didn't like it. I also once had an old guy manage to get chocolate icing all over the case. It looked like a monkey smeared poo all over the doors. And my favorite was when a coworker told me that it was extremely common for customers to lick the portioning spoons for the soup bar. Thank God they got rid of it. Story 20. My dad told me about a friend of his who was Tongan, I am pretty sure, and when he and his 5 brothers came to visit America for the first time in the early 80s, they went to an all-you-can-eat buffet. According to my dad's friend, chicken is a scarce commodity where they're from, so they went a little overboard. He said he and his 5 brothers were tiptoeing out the door when they were done because they felt as though they would be in trouble for eating so much chicken. Apparently, the owners thought it was great and caught up with them in the parking lot to give them more chicken to take home. The guys were sweating when the owner came running out after them. Story 21. Not an employee, but I went to a buffet with a buddy of mine that insisted he could pile his plate high, leave half of it uneaten, and go back for another plate, including more of the stuff he'd left behind at the table. I called him on the egregious waste, and he said, "It's unlimited and I paid for it. Why can't I waste it?" He was also rude to the serving staff and didn't tip at all. That was the last time we went out together, and the friendship fizzled shortly after that. Story 22. Not an employee, but my husband was. One night he came home and told me the story of how he was just standing around after waiting for the next batch of food to be put out. He went up to the front to check to see what needed restock, and just casually watched a small child, small enough to be under the plastic guards, proceed to just have a full-on attack and sneeze all over the food he was standing in front of. Picked up a few pieces and put them on his plate and walked away. He told his front line, and they just shrugged and said they don't have enough to replace the food just yet. He quit the next day, and that's why I refused to go to buffets ever since. Story 23. My grandma owned a small buffet in the middle of nowhere in the South, aimed at providing a place for farmers to eat. There was this one guy who came in weekly. He looked like a participant on my 600 lb life. He and his wife, the first few times, got a lot of food, but nothing too extreme. Then they started getting a lot more, to the point where we charged them double because we basically had to. The last 2 times they came in, they cleared the entire buffet. As soon as we added more food, they would clear it again. I watched them mix everything together to eat it. The guy mixed blackberry cobbler with gravy. It was so nasty. Not only did they eat way too much, they left a huge mess behind that my poor teenage self had to clean. After the second time, my grandma banned them. Story 24. We used to put crab legs out every hour or so. There were a couple of people loitering around the crab spot. When the legs were put down, this big lady just body-checked a dude and grabbed all the crab legs at once, using the plate as a kind of shovel. When he yelled at her, she said, "These are for my family." Story 25. My parents were at the Pizza Ranch, a pizza and chicken buffet chain in the Midwest. As they were eating, they saw a little girl around 6 years old take her plate of leftovers and scrape everything back into the buffet. They never went to a buffet again after that. Story 26. Not a buffet, but my dad owned a business in a small redneck kind of town. He and his employee used to eat lunch at this greasy spoon burger shack. One day, they walked in and saw the place was completely empty. They looked over and saw an employee stirring a pitcher of iced tea with her bare arm. They never went back, and the place closed not long after. Story 27. I've been doing this for a while, and I don't eat from buffets anymore. Leaning under the sneeze guard and sneezing on the salad bar, sipping from the soup ladle, picking something up with their fingers, tasting it, and putting it back on the line, visibly scratching under their skirt, sniffing, then using the same fingers to flip through a stack of cookies like a Rolodex, dropping food on the floor and returning it to the pan, picking up an entire tray of 40 cheeseburgers and walking off with it. The list goes on. But my favorite memory was when my old chef finally had enough. He saw someone stick their fingers into the food, marched up to them and said, "Excuse me, do you mind if I put my fingers in your mouth? Just grab your tongue and waggle it around a bit? No? Then keep your frigging hands out of the food." He wasn't around for much longer. Story 28. At a Chinese buffet, there was a table of 4 obnoxious women who acted like they'd never been in public before. An employee came out with a hotel pan of crab legs. One of the women snatched it out of his hand and took the whole pan to their table. Anyone nearing their table was greeted with evil stares like you were taking a snarling dog's food. Story 29. At the buffet in my college dining hall, I was standing in line getting food when the guy next to me pulled out a freezer bag. He filled the entire thing with chicken nuggets from the buffet. He saw me giving him a weird look and decided to explain. Entrance to the dining hall was $8 per person. At the start of the week, he'd pay the $8, load up on as much food as he could carry, and take it home. He survived off whatever he brought back. I thought he was insane. He said he was saving money. Story 30. I was at a hot pot restaurant in Boston a few months ago at the mix-your-own dipping sauce station. There were about 15 or so sauces, each with its own ladle to add to your bowl. Watched in absolute horror as the lady in front of me taste tested multiple sauces directly from the ladles, like fully bringing them to her lips, and sampled before putting them back. I immediately went to the general manager and said that the entire station probably needed to be changed out. Story 31. In college, I worked at a pizza place with a 30-foot salad bar. One day, a woman came in, ordered just the salad bar, and started going through it. It was a slow day, so I was cleaning the front and saw everything. No joke. She stuck her finger into one dressing, licked it, then moved to the next, did the same, and kept going. I ran over and stopped her, gave her small containers to sample the dressings properly. I ended up having to dump 2 full containers of dressing. About 2 weeks later, she came back and did it again. That time we made her leave, gave her the food to go, and told her she was no longer welcome. 2 weeks after that, she returned, tried the same thing, got denied service, and went out into the parking lot to ask strangers to buy her lunch and let her join their party. The looks of pure disgust people gave when we explained why she was banned was unforgettable. Story 32. I went to a Golden Corral once, and never again. While I was there, I watched a kid pick his nose, stick his finger in the chocolate fountain, then in his mouth, over and over. Half his family was standing right there and didn't do a thing. This was before COVID, but I noticed a lot of customers coughing and sneezing around the food, so it didn't surprise me when I came down with the flu within 48 hours. Golden Corral might just be the Florida Walmart parking lot of buffet restaurants. So yeah, chocolate-covered booger. Story 33. Just a guest, but this deserves to be here. Out of the blue, my son threw up at the buffet. It splattered on the area, and there is no chance in hell it didn't hit a nearby dish container or multiple in its vicinity. We are still kicking ourselves for not catching any signs that this was on its way, but it really caught us off guard. I immediately apologized profusely and explained the situation clearly. The kicker? The buffet staff then cleaned up the counter area around the dish and let it all just stay there. We paid, out of embarrassment, left immediately, and never came back. Looking back, I regret not informing some health authorities. I've been struggling with buffets in general ever since this episode. Story 34. My wife and I once went to a Chinese buffet with acquaintances that we thought could be friends. Well, after 4 hours of watching the guy demolish plate after plate of food and having the entire kitchen staff come out and watch like it was a circus show, I was done. He ate so much shrimp. The kitchen staff couldn't keep up. It was insane. After that, I started watching how big my portions were at meals. It was disgusting. Sadly, but not surprising, he passed away from a heart attack a few years after that. Story 35. Not a buffet, but a salad bar at a grocery store. Some lady was just shoveling cut fruit into her mouth, hand over fist, juice and bits flying everywhere. I called her out on it. I was appalled and disgusted. She tried to turn it around like I was harassing her. I went and found a manager, but they didn't do anything. She was well practiced, not her first gluttonous crime. I was leery of buffets and salad bars before, but now I avoid them like the plague. Story 36. Not a buffet worker, but at Old Country Buffet, rest in peace, I once saw a family go up for plate after plate of fried chicken and only eat the skin. There were literally piles of chicken at their table with no skin left. I am pretty sure the workers weren't clearing the plates in the hope that the family might eventually eat the meat. Similarly, I went to a pizza buffet and saw a guy just eating the cheese and toppings, leaving all the crust behind. By the time he left, there were at least 6 pizzas worth of bare bread stacked on his table. Story 37. I was behind a guy years ago in a buffet line when he scooped up a large spoonful of cottage cheese. As he brought it to his plate, The spoon hit the plastic sneeze shield, and it dumped into a lady's purse in front of him that was hanging on her arm. He quickly left the line with a horrified look on his face. Story 38. I was a patron, not an employee, but back in college we were in Las Vegas for a rugby tournament and stayed at the Gold Coast across the street from Rio. At the time, mid-90s, Rio was considered one of the best buffets there. So 25 of us are there after a day of tournament play, and someone, of course, suggests an eating contest. I finished almost dead last by only eating 5 plates of food. Our winner, a 6-7-inch lock, ate 32. Then he promptly puked in the booth we were sitting in, so we got the boot. But a picture of all of our finished plates looks like the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and an employee was amazed at how high it reached from the table. Story 39. I worked in a Chinese buffet in the UK until I became physically disabled. I saw it all. People piling their plates with literal mountains of food. You could go back as many times as you wanted, just not take more than you could eat because of the waste surcharge, then covering it all in sweet and sour sauce. People trying to wrap food up or even slip the little dessert bowls into their bags or pockets, even though it wasn't a takeout restaurant due to licensing. And parents giving their kids a full plate of food, only for the kids to refuse it. People saying their baby, clearly a toddler, wasn't going to eat, then throwing a fit when told they had to pay for the toddler. Kids mixing all the soft drinks from the refill station together. Story 40. I travel for work. At a previous company, the director of purchasing accompanied me on the first part of a trip. After dropping him off at the airport, I picked up a buyer who traveled with me for the rest of the week. The director asked me to look out for the buyer since he didn't travel much, and I kind of side-eyed him like, "Oh, okay." Oh my God. First, we had to eat every meal at the hotel because the buyer was afraid to leave. We were in Philadelphia, in a nice area. When he checked into the hotel, I thought, Sheridan? It was a nice place with a bowl of apples on the front desk for guests to grab. He emptied the whole basket, probably 8 big apples, into his backpack. Then he went over to the little store closet and started clearing that out too. I told him, "You have to pay for all of that." He honestly thought it was free. The next morning at breakfast, they had a buffet, or you could order from the menu. He took a fork, went over and started eating out of the bins on the buffet like they were his plate. Then he got mad because they charged for the buffet and didn't offer him a menu. I had to cut off his alcohol consumption at dinner too. The director and I had a discussion about it when we got back. Story 41. Not an employee, but a customer here. There was a Chinese buffet that offered free crab legs on certain nights. One lady became notorious for gatekeeping the crab legs. She'd stand nearby and wait for them to be refilled, then grab most or all of them before anyone else could. Sounds like a joke, but it's not. She eventually got kicked out, and the police were called after she bit another customer who confronted her. Wild times. Story 42. My ex-girlfriend was a manager at one of the more popular buffets. Shout out to Shady Maple. Aside from the usual chaos caused by kids and clueless people, she once had a group of Korean Elvis impersonators come in. They loved chili and anything pickled. They asked for kimchi and weren't fans of most American food, but chili and sauerkraut seemed to do the trick. Later that day, they showed up at my bar, got so sloppy drunk they vomited all the chili on the sidewalk outside while smoking. One of them even puked and soiled themselves in the restroom. Honestly, that's some serious commitment to the bit, trying to go out like the king. Story 43. Not an employee, but my own stories. First one. Growing up, I'd never been to an all-you-can-eat buffet since they weren't really a thing where I lived. When I was 14 or 15, I visited family in the South, and buffets were everywhere. The family took me to one, and as I was filling my plate, I noticed most people were piling mountains of food and often carrying 2 plates at once, not used to the all-you-can-eat idea. I asked a family member if you could only go up once. They laughed and said you could go back as many times as you wanted. That shocked me, especially seeing how much food people were taking. Keep in mind, I was a teenage boy who was always hungry and could eat like a horse, but I was amazed at how much food people piled on their plates each time and then watched them go back repeatedly for the same mountain of food. Second story, I didn't get a chance to go to a buffet again until more than 20 years later. I was driving back from the Outer Banks of North Carolina toward Charlotte with my boyfriend on a Sunday morning, and the only place open on the road was an all-you-can-eat buffet. The host was very nice, but said she could tell we weren't from around there. At first, I thought maybe it was because we were a couple, especially when she told us to hurry up and get our food since church was about to let out. We laughed it off, expecting to be stared at for being together, but as we finished filling our plates, a crowd came in, and I swear it looked like a shark or piranha feeding frenzy. They were pushing each other, being very loud, and basically clearing out the food stations. My boyfriend and I had just finished our plates and left as quickly as we could. It was wild watching people yell at the staff to bring out more food while standing right at the stations waiting. I have no idea what these folks thought about gay people, but honestly, we could have probably started making out or being intimate, and no one would have noticed. Clearly, that wasn't the reason we were warned about the church crowd. Story 44. Chinese buffet in the UK about 20 years ago. There was a guy who had been stuffing his face for 3 hours. As closing time approached, he got furious when asked to finish up because he hadn't eaten all he could yet. He threatened to sue the owner and report him, claiming all you can eat was a misleading trade description. The Simpsons nailed that episode. As far as I know, he never followed through, just angry. We also had a really drunk guy who messed his pants at the table but kept eating. And people would go to the bathroom to vomit, then come back and load their plates again. That happened a few times while I was there, maybe bulimia related. I am not sure. Story 45. I worked at a buffet in high school. One Saturday, a truly massive woman had a heart attack right at her table. I was the meat carver that day, and I will never forget what I saw. I came out of the kitchen to find paramedics shocking her and doing CPR after cutting open her shirt, trying desperately to restart her heart. While the lights and sirens were going, and this poor woman lay there lifeless just 15 feet away, in clear view, some other large customer was getting mad at me for not serving roast beef fast enough. Everyone there knew she was gone, but this guy didn't care. That was the only time I've seen someone die so far, and as a 16-year-old, it was pretty traumatizing. Story 46. I went to a well-known breakfast buffet with my ex. We were starving after spending the whole morning helping her mother deal with nonsense. We sat down, said what we wanted to do, and headed to the buffet. Just as we arrived, a woman who was holding 2 plates, no idea why, dropped one. It hit the counter and sent thousands of shards raining everywhere. She looked around like a complete dullard and then started reaching for another plate. To the restaurant's credit, a manager immediately rushed over, shut down the buffet, and told everyone they'd have to order off the menu, but would get half off their bill. While that was responsible of them, it was an absolute horror for me. I'd made it through that awful morning by dreaming of corned beef and those potato puffs they served. The perfectly fine breakfast I ended up eating ruined the rest of my day. I mean, how bad can peritonitis really be? Story 47. I am a doctor. I had an individual from a group home see me one day, and he would constantly put his hand down the back of his pants, grab around, and then bring his hand out and smell it. You can imagine my horror when about a week later, I saw him at a buffet with the rest of the people from his group home. This is about the same time I decided to start writing things down in a book to be published later. Story 48. When I was a kid, I worked at a Golden Corral before the chocolate fountain era. Back then, it was cheese sauce on everything. Is half your plate covered in fruit or dessert? Who cares? Slather on an ungodly amount of cheese sauce over the other half, soaking into everything. Is cheese sauce an acceptable salad dressing? Of course, it has to be at least equal parts cheese to vegetables, bonus points if it gets on your jello. If it's served at Golden Corral, I've seen it covered in cheese sauce. Now that they've got those gross chocolate fountains, I am sure things have only gotten worse. Story 49. I am not an employee, but I've seen things. At a Pizza Hut buffet, I saw a kid who would jam his fist down into the bacon bits and haul out a huge handful every time he went past the buffet. Not the cleanest looking kid in the world either, though that doesn't matter. It's gross regardless. I never got the buffet anyway. It was gross by definition, like Sis's pizza is all the time. And my own saintly mother once put a hard-boiled egg from the Chinese buffet into her pocket only it wasn't hard-boiled and soon broke. Story 50. I worked at a pizza place with an all-you-can-eat lunch buffet. We had this guy who ate like no one I've ever seen. For context, my personal wing record was 50 wings in one sitting, and this guy blew my mind. He probably ate the equivalent of 3 or more pizzas every time he came in. Eventually, our manager had us make special pizzas we called gut bombs when we saw him sit down. We'd layer cheese and toppings until the pizza was over an inch thick. Cooked, it probably weighed a couple of pounds and he'd eat a whole one like it was nothing. Funny thing is, he wasn't some huge guy, just a normal-looking, even kinda skinny dude. I can eat enough that my friends would pay for me to go to buffets just to watch me eat. But this guy was unlike anything I've seen before or since. Story 51. Not a buffet employee, but once, someone tried to police my plate. I was on a hiking tour when the weather turned sour and about half the attendees didn't show up. The guides mentioned it and told us there was extra food at the buffet so we could help ourselves. I was first in line and took an extra piece of chicken and about half a scoop more rice. The woman beside me immediately told me that since I was first in line, I should wait for everyone else to get their second helpings before I did. I looked at her, then at the way too much food for 6 people, back at her, and said, "Would you like some of the food off my plate?" She looked bewildered, then scoffed, No." The guy next to her tried to stifle a giggle, and I just walked away. Story 52. My last job was at a pretty big tech company with free all-you-can-eat cafeterias. It wasn't as great as you'd expect. Most of the food got pretty bland after eating there for months. I was pretty frugal, so all my meals came from there. You could take as much home as you wanted. They even provided to-go boxes. I'd grab extra food in advance, keep it in my fridge, and eat it for dinner and on weekends. The only things I bought outside were fruit and drinks. A few months into the job, on a Friday, I went to a lab to get my blood drawn for my initial physical. Later that day, or maybe the following Monday, I did my usual workout. But this time, I felt different. I was exhausted just from the warm-ups. Running 30-plus minutes, 3 to 4 miles on the treadmill felt like running a marathon. On Monday evening, I checked my phone and saw several missed calls from my doctor. They got my blood work back and insisted I go to the ER immediately. I left work and drove straight to the hospital. They did another blood test and confirmed my red blood cell count was dangerously low. I stayed in the hospital for 3 days, receiving a blood transfusion and undergoing tests to find where the blood loss was coming from. They couldn't find anything, but my red blood cell count stopped dropping after the transfusion, so they discharged me. If I had to guess, it was probably the food. The all-you-can-eat setup wasn't the most sanitary, and the food I kept in the fridge often got dried out, both likely factors. Story 53. My wife took me to an all-you-can-eat Japanese restaurant last year. They have a QR code on your table, and you order from your phone. They bring you a small plate of food, entree size, but you can order as much as you want of anything on the menu. My wife ordered one of everything. If she liked the look of it, she ordered another one. It was a big menu, and they charge you for anything you leave behind. Plate after plate came out, and we had to consolidate multiple meals onto single plates because we were running out of real estate on the table. Luckily, she has a belly because I was sweating by the time we finally cleared the table. I was groaning, and she said, "That was fun. Let's go to that new bar." Story 54. During college, I practiced a lot of martial arts. Our sensei was pretty well known in those circles and a really cool, funny guy. One night after class, he suggested we all go out to dinner at a new all-you-can-eat Japanese place in our small college town. We were all broke students, but for about $30, it seemed worth it. We figured we could easily eat a couple of entrees each. We loaded up our plates and got to work. The sensei kept ordering more and more. After a while, we started getting concerned. The guy must have eaten at least 100 pieces of sushi, plus plenty of other food. None of us wanted to be rude. It was a nice gesture for him to invite us all out to dinner, so we kept picking at our plates while he just kept going. After about 2 hours, the owner came out and said, "Wow, that's some appetite." They made some small talk. Both were Japanese, and none of us spoke the language, but the conversation clearly took a turn toward the owner cutting him off. We couldn't understand what was said, but eventually the owner left, came back, and silently dropped off the check. As we were leaving, we all remarked on what a great meal it had been. Our sensei just said, "Yeah, it was fantastic. Shame I will never get to eat here again." The owner just banned me for life. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.